There we go. Hello. Welcome, everyone. We're having a little technical issues today, but hopefully it's working now. I'm adding more and more people here, so it's going to be a fun conversation. Welcome.
I love that Michael's just bouncing up and down. I'm hoping he's on one of those space things. Of course he is. Usually when I see him on a TikTok video, he's usually in cosplay. So it's nice to see you in normal outfit.
Yes.
I am glad to. Wow, that is quite the expectation. Thanks,
so I'm not going to do a round robin to introduce everybody. We're just going to dive in today, and maybe as you guys start having the conversation, maybe introduce yourself, what you're doing, what kind of, if you have a talk at CAST, maybe share that. Yeah, we'll get the conversation started. So today we're going to be kind of digging into this concept of AI and testing. Kind of a conversation that is heavily talked about today. With me today, we have several of our speakers from CAST 2025, as well as some of our sponsors from Quality and our partners over at Provango. So we've got some great representation on the call today, including Jonathan from Keysight, right? So we've got all kinds of perspectives. But in order to kind of set the stage for the conversation, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about, as I like to do in preparation for these conversations, I wanted to throw out kind of some of the numbers around what we're looking at in today in terms of AI adoption, especially within the quality space. The World Quality Report recently reported, well, this was in 2024, that 77% of organizations are choosing to invest in AI in one or more quality assurance areas, right? So that could be automation, it could be for any number of solutions. And which I'm sure is going to raise some interesting, because there's all the debate around the value of it, how it's actually helping testers assure quality, the complexities that it's introducing, whether it's actually adding value, and whether it's actually helping us get to quality, right? And so I want to start the safe stage there in terms of, let's kind of open up with some of the problems that AI is attempting to solve in the current market, right? We've got the time constraints of testing. We've got more complexity than ever. We've got any number of factors and variables in that. So by show of hands from this group, I'd love to ask and just do this to kind of start the conversation. How many of you are actually seeing AI add value to your individual testing environments today? By show of hands. Hey. There we go. All right. So let's talk a little bit about that. Where are you guys seeing it implemented? Where are you guys seeing it add value in your own personal perspective? And while you guys start talking about that, I'm going to actually open up our chat so that we get some of our watcher participants as well engaging in this. Anyone want to start us off? Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm always happy to go. I was going to go totally off piste as usual for the starter, and because I was having a conversation with Jason Huggins while I was in Seattle around, I don't know if everyone, I'm sure I'm going to use the showing of hands as well, but has heard of Vibranium, which is the new Selenium Appium, but now Vibe testing platform. I've just put the link in the bottom. So it's another open source. Obviously, he was the founder of Selenium and Appium. This one is around vibe testing, vibe coding, and it's interesting. So I was chatting with Jason Arbin about this literally last night, and it's kind of that I guess, commoditization now of or going mainstream of this kind of AI technology. And I guess these very different things. Vibe testing, for those who were at maybe some of the START conferences over the last year, will have seen a lot of the keynotes being focused around that. I think we could probably also give a nod to people like Tariq, who've been doing AI in testing for 10 years, 10 plus years. So, I think the newer use of or misuse of the word AI is to do with generative AI, and that is, I guess, only a very small subset of deep learning and artificial intelligence, which is, I guess, again, very Hollywoodized based on the fact of everyone knowing what ChatGPT is and Transformers, not the movie. But part of it is, I think we've seen these waves, of course, since 2020 and 2017 when Transformers have been introduced. We're seeing more people talking about generative AI when they're talking about AI and not traditional ML, which, I'd love to get back to that deep learning conversation. But then even more recent, probably over the last 12 months, 24 months, and I guess last time I probably saw Michael at PNSQC, we started on this vibe testing wave, which I think is also getting people really excited around agentic AI, i.e. this ability to interact with agents. And so when you ask that question of where is the value, I think we've seen value in AI in software testing for the last 10 years in very specialist areas. And then we've now seen more emergence of utilization of Jeff's tools and a few other vendors that are bringing in next generation generative capabilities to the mainstream. And then more recently, we've seen this adoption, just like we did with Selenium, 20 years ago, of things like this Vibrium, where this idea of I want to do vibe testing, right? I want to just be able to open up Copilot or whatever else I want, Gemini or Claude, and just say to it, do some testing for me. Now, of course, like when we were in Portland, it's a very controversial topic, because as soon as you say, should an AI be testing, I guess we could go on all night. But I think what we're trying to say is there a benefit, whether it's creating some synthetic data, helping you with some environmental configuration issues, accessibility, which Michael's going to be talking about in his workshop. If you don't know W3C, you don't know WCAG, you don't know the new European Accessibility Act, which comes into force next month, and you're not best friends with Lavina or something, then you might not be an accessibility expert. Whereas you can pass it a screenshot to your favorite GPT and say, oh, what accessibility testing should I do? And I'm sure it will help. It'll help more than I will, because I know nothing about accessibility or usability. So with that, I'm going to throw it all over to Michael. As he's bouncing, he's going to be able to catch it and tell you about his presentation where there'll be no AI in accessibility. Or is there an A and an I in accessibility?
Well, there's not an A. There's not a I in. There's not an I in accessibility, but there is an A and a Y in regards to that, and 11 letters in between. Point being is that, yes, you've actually given a very good example that I've even used a number of times to say, hey, I want to be able to look at something specific for the WCAG environment, and I may not know everything that I need to about it, but I want to say, hey, here's what I'm looking at. Here's what I want to be able to resolve. What are some areas that I want to consider specifically based on the fact that you have a running copy of WCAG 2.2 floating around in your noggin somewhere, meaning whatever LLM happens to be out there. And within a couple of seconds, they can go, hold on, let me go check that. Oh, yeah, great. So you want to take a look at these areas based off of this stuff. Here's some example tests I can give you. Here's some areas you might want to look at. Here's how you might want to be able to consider basic situations like color contrast, or how you might want to go about looking at a particular grade of do you want to level A, do you want to level double A, do you want to level triple A? This is what you would need based off of what the page is here, and looking at its page elements. Here's how close you're going to get. Now, granted, could you do the same thing with Axe? Yes, you could. Could you do it with Axe and have no AI component with it? Yeah, but then you get this big long list and you need to kind of know what to do with it. Not a bad thing to do, but if you're coming at it brand new and clean, how do you make sense of it? Well, you could go through and say, can you give me a summary of all of the details in here? What are the things that would, under a normal audit, cause a trigger? And what would rational conversation be considered things that we should really want to address? Now, mind you, if you're not experienced with that level of a conversation, what it gives you might make sense, might be very plausible. And the phrase I often bring up whenever I talk about AI of any type, it's getting better, but I do say this: AI is frequently wrong. And the key thing to be aware of is that AI is confidently wrong a lot of the time. So you have to be alert to that, and you have to verify what you're looking for. And if you are a relative neophyte in regards to accessibility standards and advocacy and what normally passes as pass or fail, you might get 90% of it being very good information, but you might get 10% of it being kind of off the rails. And then you have to just decide, does that make sense or doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you not only have to look at whether it's right or wrong, but also, is it biased? And bias, as I'll talk about in my presentation, it comes from data, it comes from how the data is learned, it also comes from the algorithms, and it can also come from requirements. Google Gemini at one point was giving what they thought was more woke answers, which were not necessarily correct. So, it's the thing with AI, it's not even just, is it right or is it wrong? It's not
Yeah.
that cut.
Yeah. Well, and there's so you bring up, definitely one of the major concerns in the quality space that's being brought up, Jerry, is really around the biases that exist in it, and how that impacts. I mean, especially today, we're kind of talking directly around AI within the testing space, and how that impacts testing, right? And how it impacts the ability to assess quality. Thoughts on that? Like, what are we seeing? Like, what are we seeing in practicality? What are we seeing from a challenge perspective, and how are you all overcoming that?
So I'll give a perspective on that.
Yeah.
So from what I've seen, there are places where it's very, very useful, and some where it's still struggling, or maybe still nascent is maybe the better term. In its current format, AI is very good in narrow context slices. If you can keep the context that it's operating within pretty small, it tends to be more accurate in those spaces. So, for example, when it comes to development, it's very, very good at actually promoting test-driven development. So when you are building software, you can take your requirements or architecture, actually start with the tests. It can oftentimes help suggest or even build out the test file first. And then, especially if you hand a well-built test file to AI and have it then code, write the files that would create the actual production code for that, it tends to do pretty good in those guardrails. Again, very narrow slice. You have it focused down to like a module within your application and tests, and sort of going from that workflow of architecture to tests to code is a fairly reliable way to get pretty high quality code. Where I have found that it struggles right now is, or at least where there are difficulties, and this could very well just be like, Matt hasn't figured out how to do this well. So would love to hear opinions on others from this, but it's when building out and testing actual AI workflows. So for example, the product that I'm building right now is effectively what I'll affectionately call Chart GPT, which is the ability to give doctors the ability to have an interactive voice conversation with your patient chart. And the interesting thing about this space is that there are no less than 7 inference workflows in a single interaction. You talk about agentic AI, so like just asking the question, there's an inference workflow that is doing the speech to text, an inference workload that is doing the turn detection, Then you go into just grabbing the intent of the question. What part are you asking about? Are you asking about, depending on the different things you could ask about in the conversation, there's another inference workload there. Then depending on which part of the chart you're asking about, there's an inference workload to turn that into API calls to, in our case, like a HealthLake API, which I won't go into the details there, but then you kind of get the idea. There's like named entity recognition. And then on the text to speech side again, you have more inference models. So there are a huge number of non-deterministic black boxes in just a single workload, and figuring out how to test that reliably, honestly, using AI or not, in this case, like those sorts of things, sort of more on the cutting edge of working with AI itself, where you have these non-deterministic black boxes that get fired off to third parties. That really just makes for a very difficult testing environment in general.
Right. Well, and Matt, you have chosen to operate in such a low risk tolerance space. And so, the question around bias becomes even more critical in these highly regulated environments and frankly, high risk, right? Because, in the case of a healthcare environment, if the AI makes the wrong decision, someone could die, right?
And that's why specifically when you build out workloads like this, they need to be multi-step, agentic, and really ideally you're only using the inference workloads for the for summarization, for things like speech to text and text to speech. Like you're not asking it for decision making, and anything that's actually grabbing like hard facts is going to a traditional API that is vetted, and like you have very strong like more traditional QA controls and regression testing and things around that. And so you're really only kind of trusting AI with that last mile, that sort of the interaction between the person and the information, but the information is still kind of in more traditional workload format. But still, there's a lot of components in there, individual components doing individual pieces that are all part of the sort of end-to-end workflow that are still black box.
Two different things too. You're talking about testing using AI, but there's also testing the AI.
Right.
Yes. Right.
And this is sort of the intersection of both of those spaces.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and then there's both.
Right. And as people try to use accelerate development, right, using generating code, and you're basically generating AI generated code, right? So development moves faster, and obviously creating more bugs. So everything is becoming, I think, actually putting more emphasis on the role of QA here, because development moves faster now. But it's kind of like having installing a bigger engine on a car, but without reinforcing the wheel and the brakes. It's kind of like, let's go faster and find more walls to bump into. They rely on QA to basically make sure that no walls are being hit, but we need to up our tools.
Well, and I would say competency, right? Like just in understanding. Sorry, and I think I cut off somebody, but I don't know who was.
No worries. I was just going to jump in because I was talking with the founder of Artemis Health about this problem where you're talking about going through, inference. He was talking about every single one of those failure points when you're using AI transcribing doctors. And we were actually talking about a system that takes it a step further and says, well, we're also using these medical models that are, and even some of the open, or not medical specific models, but, OpenAI O3. And when you look at it, its performance compared to regular physicians, well, great. If it can do a generally better job, and you have, at what point do you say this causes, if 1 in a million times it's totally wrong, then that starts to look very good. Where if it's 1 in 100, that's just not acceptable, right? Even if you compare it to a human who is wrong, maybe 3 in 100 times, right? And you start to see these edge cases, but it kind of brings it back to testing, where you're like, you've got, in the past, we talk about, testing, and we have hard test cases, and there's a reason we still need to have that. But then you also have AI, and in AI, they don't say test cases so much, they say evals, right? You've got the evaluations that you're running. And those evals become critical, right? Because that's what's telling you across this huge range that continues to build. You're going to continue to add to your eval set as you get more data, as you see more use cases.
Right.
Are you seeing, if I make a prompt change, I need to rerun every one of those evals to know where is my AI system at today, right?
Right.
And when it comes to QA, like when people talk about QA is about lowering risk, right? Like, there's the cost trade-off there, but you have to say, how much cost can I invest to lower my risk by how much?
Right.
And,
Right.
as I was saying, those AI tools have accelerated the risk. You've got AI code coming out, and you also have AI solutions as part of your application now. So you've got these two major new risk areas, right?
Right.
And organizations aren't saying, well, we're gonna invest in a major way now in the cost side to help provide more resources for QA to deal with those, right?
Right.
They're not saying we'll invest more in QA. Instead, they're saying, well, we're using the AI tools, good luck. And so
and go out and automate everything and just make it all happen.
Right.
It just happen at the click of a button. Right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do.
I probably say, it's not the same, QA testing, whatever you want to call it, and testing of AI systems. So I published a book back in 2020, which was Artificial Intelligence for Software Testing, which was the ISO 29119 Part 11 Working Committee of 10 years with the work for testing AI-based systems, right? That's a completely different thing to QA. If I gave that to a standard QA resource and said, okay, here, test some RAG pipelines, no chance, right? I might be okay if I've got a data scientist, I've got a few quantum guys, I pass that information on to them. What we're talking about here is AI assurance. We're talking about a completely different discipline to be able to test of AI systems. Equally, I think probably get a little bit maybe ahead of ourselves, because when we think of things like agentic testing, really what we're meaning is testing of agentic workflows, which is something completely different. That then adds 10x complexity. We're doing A2A, which is agent to agent, and ACP, agent context protocol, which we got in the real field with health customers, actually with Cerner and Epic, both using this kind of agentic capabilities. But of course, we have to test that system within an inch of its life. A lot of these things that are highly regulated, that are against things like the European Union AI Act and the executive order in the US and the ISO 42001 AI risk framework, that's a whole different world to a traditional QA. And, I was scared to blur those boundaries and just go, okay, this is just part of your workflow now. I think, testers and quality assurance and quality engineering, there's only so much reach. It's like expecting someone, like Michael said, about being an accessibility expert or being a OWASP security engineer. We don't ask for specialist skills and generalization skills to exist. But I do think you're absolutely hit the nail on the head. Because a lot of people are talking about use cases for AI to help assist testing or augment testing, which is one thing, when actually the real focus should be testing of AI-infused systems, because everyone's running with scissors and they're going in. You forget the whole PII, GDPR, California data privacy, and data, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
We've gone further past that. I think we've got a massive risk to the industry, and I think even where Matt's talking about, we're going to be seeing huge fines, violations of privacy and trust in how AI is making clinical decisions. It's going to, of course, we can look at the stats from MIT and Stanford and say actually it outperforms their doctor with 3 years, experience, residency experience. But again, it's going to consistently kill 3% of the patients, right? And then you're going to be auditing that from an AI auditing perspective, and then passing that on to the regulators and saying, is that acceptable? And that's the different conversation about risk. And then I think we're going to see fines. And we're also going to see potential brand damage and also concerns of citizens. And I think it's an AI literacy challenge. Is no one's been enabled to understand the complexity of this. However, everyone's been told, use AI productivity tools. That could be just generating code, which Matt came out and pointed out on this side. Developers, even the CEO of Microsoft stood on stage and wrote some production code, doing vibe coding and released it into production. should
Right.
the CEO of Microsoft be fixing production issues live on stage and then deploying production systems? I think the answer is no. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I think, yes, there's a big ethical discussion about, well, what is that future role of testing? And I think there is a lot of fear in that because of the lack of understanding of complexity when we start introducing this. So I think, we're at the tip of the iceberg, and maybe we're past that whole 2 years of hype of AI, and now we're actually going back to basics and saying, well, what is our new role in this new world? What do we need to, what new skills do we need to arm ourselves? Not just the UCAG stuff, which I don't know anything about. And this is the problem. This is what I think Michael highlighted, but maybe again we've missed, is actually it's widening the skill gaps. If you've got someone, if you've got 10 Michaels, which, I'd love 10 Michaels, right? Then you can put one on accessibility, one on usability, one on performance, and he will use his mind and his Jedi skills to think about it from a best testing way possible. But we don't have 10 Michaels. And junior resources can look at this information and make bad decisions because they've not got the skills to quickly look at it and go, no, that's not the critical question that I need to be asking. I need to reframe it and be able to process that much quicker. So people who are junior are having a harder time than the more experienced resources. So it's widening the gap, not shortening, narrowing the gap. That's massively worrying.
Well, Jonathan, you touched on. Oh, go ahead, Hung.
I just want to add my perspective. I think that we need to think about testing AI or testing AI powered system versus using AI in testing. Let's do different topic, but let me address. I mean, Jonathan said back to the basic. Okay, so the basic to me is testing is still the same. You still have these things that you have to do. You still have these tests that you have to do. And yes, we add on top of that the layer of so-called evaluation, right? But even in evaluation, it's still, you still designing the scenario, okay? But then you don't have a deterministic output, okay? You need to have you have statistical values coming back, and then you have threshold that you set it whether it's acceptable or not. But at the end of the day, all of that testing is still going back to very basic, which is input and then computation, okay? And it's memory being stored somewhere, data being stored somewhere, and you check the output. But how you evaluate the output would be differently, and also how you inject inputs would be differently as well, because normally we have for UI you got text box or droplets and things like that, and you provide inputs, and API you do a post and get, and you get the inputs and outputs out. But with AI, the input is really in the prompt, so the prompt itself is input, right? So you want to do like injection of adversarial testing, you can do that at the prompts. So that it's just really changing the way that we have to think about testing. But the tasks we are doing would pretty much very, very about the same thing that we have been doing right now. In using AI for testing, I personally think that it's not magical, but I think it's a magical utility that it can assist you in doing so many different things, in from test design, to requirement reviews, to do static code testing, and all of that you can use LLM based, and then with the agentic AI, but to understand and apply all of this, the tester really need to understand everything behind. And I think the first of all is the prompt, right? Even if you use agentic AI in your workflow, right, you still need to design the prompts. So that's just really the basic fundamental that all the tester has to be really good at understanding the system prompts and the user prompt and building a prompt library, because at the end of the day, I think that is a very essential skill, right? But I also think at the same token, despite the limitation of AI and everything, I find that the challenge for us is figuring out how to have like a team-based uh, AI workflow as a pipeline, so the team can collaborate with using this amazing AI assisted technology. Today, I think as an individual, you can do, vibe coding, you can do vibe testing, you can do test, AI assisted test case design and all of that. But building a workflow, okay, that implement the whole, uh, workflow of testing with AI assisted, it has been challenging, at least for us, especially if we think about using open source and sorting things out, how to get that pipeline in phase. So I think it's very exciting. It's amazing where we are at today, having the opportunity to have all of this technology. It's an amazing utility that we must use it, but I think we need to understand how it works and apply it intelligently and safely as well.
I think you touch on an important point there, Hung, is really kind of understanding that it's not, and I mean, this might raise some feathers in the room, but the more I have dug into understanding how, at least at a very basic level, how it works, you start to realize that it's not as intelligent as we would like to think, right? And it's still a program, and it's still code, and it's still, yes, it's way more dynamic, and can interact with us in very different ways than we are used to. But it is still very limited. It is still very flawed. It has a lot of constraints around how it responds to you. And it's, ultimately today, even still, it's fantastic pattern recognition engine, right? And and yes, we're broaching on this capability now where it's getting to the point where after some interactions with it, right, after giving it the right prompts and after kind of providing the context, it starts to logic things based on the contextual data as opposed to just the logical breakdown of the input that you're providing it, right? And we've shared a little bit of the research on some of this through AST's feed. This is a fascinating topic to go, like, and for me, I don't sleep well lately, so it's for me at 3 a.m. kind of delving down the rabbit hole of how these models work and the studies around them to understand kind of the response mechanisms and how they're forming those responses and how they're trying to how they're kind of getting to the response to whatever input you're providing it, right? Fascinating. But I do think, I mean, this comes back to some pretty core competencies that we have to get back to and almost re-embrace as quality professionals, and that's around curiosity, right? And really kind of delving in to understand what it is we're actually interacting with. And I don't think that's something, you get a lot of the fear today in the quality space around AI coming in and replacing the testing. That's not something that AI is going to do. It's not going to replace the curiosity. It's not going to replace the human thought behind a lot of these activities that we take on every single day in our professions, right? I do want to shift gears. Oh, go ahead, Hung. Sorry.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I do like to think that the mindset wouldn't be thinking about whether it's replacing us or not. Maybe it will, but I think the key thing is just look at it as a tool, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing tool, okay? And if you don't learn how to understand the technology and to use this tool, it's not perfect, but it's amazing what it can do. And if you just think of it at that and not to worry about whether it's going to replace us or not, and just even it's overwhelming to even learning the technology and figuring out when to apply this technology, and then on the flip side, how the hell you're going to test it, and that's what our job is all about. Right. And I think we have this opportunity to interact with an amazing technology today, and testing is just like a small portion of that. People are investing $1 billion and to just building LLM and the agentic AI and trying to like GPT just launched and try to put operator into GPT and make it the agent. So I mean this is crazy. And then if we don't understand how everything works and how it would impact in a very positive way in how we do tests, but also the negative way to how the hell we're going to test this, then
Right.
we can be replaced today. It doesn't have to wait, Yeah.
Yeah. And on the opposite side of that, I think it's a balance, right? Because you do have to think about responsibly implementing it. You do have to think about data privacy. You do have to think
Yes.
about ethical considerations. And for
Yes.
anybody that didn't catch our live stream a couple weeks ago, we kind of delved into that a little bit with Olivia Gamblin, who is also a speaker at CAST. And she is an AI ethicist and brought some fantastic insights to the table and will no doubt bring some fantastic detailed insights a little bit more at CAST as she kind of broaches the ethical and the responsible side of AI implementation. But there is like the practicality of it as well around, there's the old adage around you learn how to use a hammer and then
Yeah.
you use that hammer and apply it to everything, right? And so I think there is some potential for us to kind of use wisdom in terms of how we're using it and what types of activities we're applying it to. And again, I think the first step of that is really learning and exploring what the constraints are, exploring what the possibilities and the capabilities are, and also understanding the impact, right? Because AI is very expensive.
Right.
And so there's a cost to it as well that we're not going to have time to really delve into today. But I do want to switch gears a little bit because we are about halfway. Well, we're a little bit more than halfway through here. I do want to talk a little bit. I mean, we've kind of set the stage for a lot of different concepts, a lot of different thoughts around the current landscape. And some of the challenges there, some of the risks that are being introduced. I do want to kind of flip it and kind of hand things over to you, Peter, Jeff, Michael, and get your perspectives on how, you guys are heavily in this space today. You guys are creating tools out there for quality professionals to utilize. How are you addressing some of these challenges today? And what are some of the things that you're seeing?
Sorry, I'm muted. I want to give one additional thought here, not just from a quality perspective, but also to kind of bolster a little bit of what Hung just said here in regards to everybody is panicking because AI is coming to take your job, right? And every time that I hear this, I always step back and I say, what in history can we look to where such a pronouncement was a thing and proved to be very wrong, right? And so I always look at this, and I know that in today's world, we use the term Luddite as a disparagement, but it's interesting how few people actually know what that term means and what it was about and when it happened. And it dates, centuries back. The Luddites were the ones that went in and broke up the wool industry machines because it was going to take away the jobs from the people who did twilling and who did wool manufacture. And the interesting thing is that, well, one, that was not a really good use of their times and efforts. Many of them got punished for doing so. Of course, it made their movement a punchline for centuries. But more to the point, their fears did not come to pass, in the sense that not only did the machinery not put the wool workers out of business, it actually created much more of a market for them to be able to expand and get more people involved in. Now, what it did do was it took a very quote unquote gilded skilled class that had at one point in time had a monopoly on such things, and it spread out that knowledge to more and more people to be able to utilize it and be effective with it. And so in that case, if your goal is to protect a fiefdom, yeah, I think that it is safe to say that that level of containment is gone, but it gets that way with every industry. But it also opens up new vistas and avenues for you to work with. I've fondly said, we joke about the fact that if we work hard enough on what we do and if we solve all of our problems, we work ourselves out of jobs, right? But in the real world, not really, because once you've worked yourself out of one job, there is some other problem floating around someplace else that you will be now well trained up for to take on there. So I think the biggest thing we need to realize, and again, coming from my own testing world and me having to address this right now, because that's part of what I do as a development test engineer, I've spent the better part of the whole last year literally learning our products, literally learning how it all fits together. And I've sat here, I said, I've been at this company for almost a year now, and I still feel like I only have scratched the surface of what it does. And the nice thing is that I actually do work at a company where they understand, yes, our product is absurdly complex. And you are not the only one who feels that way. I've had some other people who've been in the company for years more than me saying, you are so not alone here. You are not you're not just by yourself thinking, everybody else gets this and I'm an idiot because I can't quite grok this. No, everybody goes through this. All of us have. But it also means that trial by fire is waiting for everybody. AI is not going to necessarily take everything away from you and like, oh, I don't have to worry about this anymore and I can just go on and do what? You still have to understand what it's doing. You have to, in a sense, especially with the product that I work on, which is governance. And if I'm going to govern AI, I have to understand what are all the parameters that could potentially befoul it. What could cause it to go rogue? What could cause it to go off the rails? And the product that we work with doesn't care what product or what model you're using. We can work with just about anything out there. I mean, that's a gross generalization. I'm sure there's things that we haven't considered, but most of the available models that people use for agentic or LLM or forecasting, etc., there's a lot of framework around how those work. There's understandings about how those work, and therefore we take those understandings, and more times than not, the biggest thing that we're doing is we're monitoring and actively in use AI, and we're looking to see how is it doing based off of the various tests that we have. And there's a whole slew of what we refer to for our, and I'm trying not to pitch my company here, but we have a bunch of what we call out of the box monitors, OOTBs. And if I were to sit here and tell you what the Kovel-Smirnov test is, like for most people, they're going to go, what? And I probably mixed up two tests, to be honest. But there's a whole bunch of these tests that I go through that looked at things like data drift analysis, and they look at things like PII, and they look at things like and they tell you at this given point, hey, you've drifted by 0.05 from your last run. Now, what does that mean? Somebody has to understand what that means to be actionable with it, right? Just having the AI run and having a monitor run and say, oh, you've gone over here, or hey, we're raising a red flag because you've stepped out of this tolerance. Okay, that's great. What does that mean, though? And if you don't have enough people there who understand what the stuff means,
just like any metric, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
I think it's quite interesting. I'm just going to try and move the conversation to the back to Jeff and a few other people to the tool question. But because I like what Michael said, and I'm adding two things to it. First is, I remember, Dorothy Graham, she wrote the first automation code back in 1973 for Bell Labs, right? First automation code. She just lives a few miles away from me up the road. And, whenever you go and visit her, she'll take you to the Loom Museum. And of course, we all know the programmable looms, which Michael was just mentioning, was the first, used in the fashion industry, and again was seen to be automating, replacing people. And to Ben's question, who's on YouTube, says the same thing. 1968, there was a report that said developers will be no longer needed in the 1970s. This is the first couple of years where we've actually seen the demand for developers drop considerably, since 2000. And it's interesting because I think a lot of that is directly done towards vibe coding. And we could also see these 7% of making people redundant in places like Amazon and Microsoft also as a concern around AI. But I don't think it is. I think it's due to improved efficiency and over hiring. But actually, I think to Michael's point, you're absolutely right. You are never going to be replaced by AI. However, you are going to be replaced by somebody else using AI. Yep. Therefore, you need to come to CAST and learn about all these tools, as Hung said, so that you can actually arm yourself to out-tool everybody else, just like the guild making those weavable side of things. So, part of it is, I think you're absolutely right. And, I was in Stanford, actually, and also the National Computer History Museum, looking at some of Turing's work, again, back in 1950, which was when he started writing papers on things like the singularity, on things like where artificial intelligence would do, just like when you said, it's artificial, it's not intelligent, right?
Right.
And context is king. And so I know when I caught up with Jeff last, I was looking at his platform. It's phenomenal, because what he's doing is taking a huge amount of context, just like Michael's had to learn for the last 12 months on his job. And he doesn't know, he probably knows 20, 30, 40% of everything he needs to, because he can't know what 0.0005% is, because otherwise the data scientists and the data engineers are out of jobs, right? Part of it is you can't know everything. Equally, you can't know everything about every single domain. So understanding the domain and context, and then, Jeff's really taken that to the next step, saying, we could even go back to Tom Gilb in the 1970s and Planguage and Evo design. It's back to requirements engineering. It could even be Dorothy's book on document inspection. Like, who wants to read a book about document inspection? But like you said, somebody, understanding that actually the requirements not be correct. You saw Cairo, which is an agentic platform which launched 2 weeks ago by Amazon, replacing Cursor. That starts with requirements. It doesn't do vibe coding. It does vibe requirement design and helps you refine your requirements. If you saw last week, Google launched their agentic IDE called Firebase. Again, they've gone at a different angle. Part of it is there's lots of tools, like Hung said, that can do lots of really powerful things. And in the wrong hands, everything looks like a nail, everything's a hammer. However, people like Jeff, Peter, and Michael have been building solutions that will actually help support your role in testing,
right,
and bring this power to your fingertips, but in a way that, like Michael's done, has got that AI governance, has got that alignment where they're going through and understanding some of the complexity, because you shouldn't be building your own tools. And we know there's going to be so many exciting things. We don't know it's an exponential tool launch, right? We could see somebody else release something next week. We don't know what's next.
Tomorrow.
We don't know what's tomorrow. But so we're using the tools today, and we've got to learn these skills, these AI literacy skills that are going to prepare us for tomorrow, right? And these are cognitive reasoning skills that, are human interaction-based skills that we've been, and critical thinking, which we've been practicing as an industry for decades. Right now, we're just unlocking the full potential of those testers. And I think, in all fairness, it's the most exciting time, the time when we should all be going to CAST and learning from peers, having those discussions, and putting the pressure on people like Jeff, because I know I did, and I had to ask the hard questions, and he said, this is how it works. And as soon as it's explainable AI, suddenly you're like, wait a second, there's some real value in what I can do here.
Right.
And if I bring this plus this and this, it is going to give me that 20 to 25% productivity boost, which is all they're talking about. So even since 2020, when GitHub Copilot was launched and stable code started coming out for code generation and developers, they've only ever seen a 15 to 20% productivity gain.
Right.
But 15, 20% of taking away some of those painful jobs that you have to do as a tester, fantastic. But it's not automation. We've seen that silver bullet. This might seem like another silver bullet, but you've got to better understand where it's going to be useful, where it's not going to be useful, and come and learn loads of stuff at CAST. But anyway, I wanted to kind of hopefully throw it towards Peter and Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's open the floor to Peter and Jeff. We've basically laid out the entire context for it. So
yeah, no, this is perfect.
Michael.
No, this has really been fantastic, because from my perspective, we look at this. I think the best way that I've heard this said was there's a guy named Dave Hendegren that was hired away from Microsoft to Shopify. And the Shopify mentality, like, they were in the news a lot for their CEO saying, we're not going to hire anyone unless you could show me AI can't do it. And there was a lot of stuff there. Dave's job is more, look, we're going to come in and we're going to see where can we automate tasks, not jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That distinction. And I think it's a great one, because when I look at AI, I think, the reality is if you take any individual task, you can build a system with AI to accomplish that individual task in a way that is reliable, right? And it's sort of to Jonathan's point, like, we shouldn't all just try to say, I'm going to use ChatGPT and do this, because you don't know all of the pieces around that, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason that we spend a huge amount of time on testing our own systems, and we have QA engineers and we have our AI engineers whose job has been very focused on building out the evals, right? They're very specific skill sets and tasks, but at the end of the day, we look at it and we say, there are tasks that AI can help, and it can take, a QA's engineer, like, your role is shifting, right? It's not, oh, am I dealing with fixing a broken automation test because the selector sucks again, right? Like, that shouldn't be part of your role anymore, right? Gwen, it might have been you. Someone said we've got to get back to the fundamentals of, QA engineers should be creative. They also should be looking at the bigger picture. There's a lot of things there, because I look at AI and I say, you take an individual task and you look at how it compares to a human. The medical ones are a great example where we're starting to see it is outperforming humans. But if you take all of everything and just say, go test it, right? That's going to fail. That's going to crash and burn for a reason.
Right.
And a big part of it, again, Jonathan brought this up, is context. There's a lot there, and there's a lot of things that we're doing there. But
yeah,
at Quality, sort of our mentality is, look, we need to build a system that says, you're a QA engineer, you know what you need to be doing, and you shouldn't be wasting your time in the weeds on little, like, I love using the selector example, but you should be saying, look, and Quality should be able to help you do a lot of that work where you say, great, now I have these tests, I know those are going to run. And we do have some things there that help address testing cases where the results are non-deterministic and some of these other situations, because it is a shocking amount of time we run into companies where people are just saying, like, yeah, the QA engineer's job is to make sure that AI stuff's working, and it's like, what? Anyway, so that's a real world problem. But anyway, long story short, we really do think that AI should play a role in QA today, and that QA engineers shouldn't see it as a job threat. They should be seeing it as, what should my role be today, and where can AI help me on those tasks? And that's what our whole platform is built around, is making that easy and making it so that you don't have to build the evals for your AI system, but you can get the benefits of that as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because one thing that struck me about, Jeff, our conversations that we've had historically, and just kind of getting you all involved in CAST, one of the things that strikes me with you guys is really kind of the willingness to engage with the quality community and really understand the challenges that you're trying to solve for, right? I mean, I think that's such an important piece of this that we often miss, and many organizations, frankly, are missing it right now, is what problems are they trying to solve, right? And so, if you guys were to sum up, like, the problems that you are trying to solve at Quality, like, what is the problem set for you? What are the prime targets that you guys are hoping to solve for?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are two, right? The biggest one being, we're trying to make it so that QA engineers can keep up with the increased risk that is being introduced through whether it's AI coding or other AI productivity tools. So we're trying to make that feasible. And then the second is we're trying to enable QA and testing in general to be a more across the development lifecycle process, right? The moment a developer starts writing code, and even before, you should start to have testing be a bigger part of that.
Yeah.
And then that makes it so the QA engineer can be looking at this and saying, across everything, how are we doing on coverage? How are we doing on testing every piece here? Again, I love that you brought up the creativity aspect, because that's really what we want the human doing.
Yeah.
Whereas quality should be saying, yeah, we're going to help you keep up with the increased rate of code and the even higher increased rate of risk, and do a lot of that, help you do a lot of that work for you. And we're going to help you bring that QA mentality earlier into this, so that even developers are now seeing that and more involved in that. While you can now focus more on, I'm a QA engineer that has spent 20 years or however long building out this understanding of how we should test systems, how we should address these things. And I'm not sitting here spending all of my time because another test broke, or
Right.
whatever else is going on there.
Yeah. So as far as when you guys, because you guys will be with us at CAST, really excited to have you there. Thrilled to have you as one of our vendors on site. What are the questions, what are some of the insights that you're looking for from the quality community right now, right? Like, what are some of the evolving topics that you guys are looking to gain some insights on from this crowd?
Yeah, what a wonderful question, and thank you. And I know we're bumping up here. I mean, that's such a good question, Gwen. And unfortunately, I could spend the next 2 minutes just enumerating the answer to that without actually getting any feedback from this group. But I think that the main thing that we're always looking to our customers is, what is the most important part of your applications to test? Every single application is unique. What are those unique things? To have a QA tool, which that's really what it is, it needs to be broad enough to encompass a lot of different use cases, but at the same time, it can't be so big and cumbersome that it's too difficult to set up. So finding that right balance is always what we're looking to our particular community to helping us source. But again, I know that we only have 1 minute, and just really want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here.
If you guys have a few minutes, we'll give it a few minutes. I don't mind doing that. Not a problem. I don't want to cut you off, Jeff, so feel free to keep going.
Well, no, and I don't necessarily have much more to say. And I think, this group has, a collective, an incredible amount of years of work in this space. And so certainly would defer to them. But outside of that, maybe just to wrap up, just something that I feel super, super passionate about is that every single organization is going to change. But we get to be in control largely of a lot of that change. And I think that it should be an empowering thing. As opposed, and I know that there's a lot of different views that you could take on it. I do think that AI will completely change the world in so many ways, and I think that we should be very clear-eyed about that. But at the same time, at least in the short term, we're going to be able to really do it on our terms using tools, hopefully like quality. So thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's interesting because I think about AI kind of like it takes me, and this is going to show my age, so bear with me. But and I know several of you on this call are with me, but back in the mid 90s, early mid 90s, when the internet really wasn't a thing, right? I mean, it was a thing, but not really. Like it was just kind of getting out there, and then all of a sudden there was the internet, right? And imagine today, right, how successful you would be as a quality professional if you didn't really understand the internet and web applications and those interactions, right? And I think we're facing another one of those evolutions in technology today, and quantum, I expect, will be right on its heels. And as Jonathan was mentioning before, we could delve into that and spend another 4 hours, probably 24 hours on it, and fry everybody's brain doing it. But it brings up the most critical point today, which is we've got to be willing to learn something new and to challenge ourselves as quality professionals to take the opportunity for things like CAST. And if it's not CAST, if you're not able to do CAST, get out there and start playing with these tools, start experimenting with them, get your hands on them. And, you know, in line with that, I have put up a QR code with the quality trial link. We will have so many opportunities to have more detailed conversations around this and so many other AI related topics. You know, Jonathan will be there talking. Jeff and Peter, I believe you guys will be there on site having some fantastic conversations. Jerry, you'll be sharing your insights around testing for bias in these systems. Michael will be there talking about model-based testing. Hung will be there talking about prompts. I mean, we've got Matt will be doing an incredible panel that's incredibly experimental. And also, as we were talking about before the conversation today, it is Black Mirror based. So we're expecting to have half the audience die, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We will make sure that no one dies at the end of it all.
10% is acceptable, or maybe 3. Was that what 3% was acceptable?
It's more
from
of a
earlier in the conversation.
3%, yeah.
Yeah.
As long as they get to live in cyberspace later forever.
That's right. So, I mean, it's going to be, you know, I think the fun thing about that CAST is going to give us the opportunity to do is really play with these concepts, to throw different perspectives around and kind of dig into some of the challenges and figure out what the solutions are, because AI is still so new that we're all learning together in this, and you know, no one's alone, right? Nobody on this call knows it all. No one on this call has it all figured out or understands everything there is to know about AI. We're all learning it together. And that's kind of the exciting thing about it. So thank you all to my guests today. You all have had such fantastic insights. I personally cannot wait to see you all in Salt Lake City, August 25th through 27th. For those of you who are listening, we had a wonderful CAST discount for registration that was up in the corner. It has been replaced now by the quality trial link. But I will mention, as part of CAST, we are going to have an AI testing tool face-off for our day one hack night. And so we've talked about getting teams together to take on a quality problem and see which system reigns supreme when it comes to whether it's a specific tool or whether it's we've actually, there's been some mumblings that they're going to put together a human team to go up against the tools as well. So it should be an interesting experiment and fun, right? That's the whole point of this. So thank you all. I will let you get back to your day, but wonderful insights today, probably more questions than there are answers, but hopefully CAST will help with a little bit of that. And I wish you all the great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you guys.